And what a treat it is because I'm sitting in the studio with New Hampshire's 82nd governor, Chris Sununu. Governor, it is so cool to have you here.
It is really cool to be here, man. This is terrific.
And we were just, full disclosure to our listeners, Governor Sununu said, do you like doing this? I've gotten to fill in and host some shows. I said, brother, I love it.
Well, you're great at it. And I'll just say this. I don't care if Brian's listening. You have better hair and you are very well dressed for a radio guy. You are knocking it out of the park. I walked in without a tie on and I felt like I was going to get kicked out of the fancy restaurant or something.
Governor, I'm only looking sharp on radio because I was doing the full Kilmeade experience, doing Fox and Friends for 3 hours, run up with less than 5 minutes to spare, jump in and do 3 hours of radio. I don't know how Brian Kilmeade does this.
It's the Kilmeade decathlon
He's
of media.
Literally, it's like the Kilmeade challenge. And I run marathons. I've run more than a dozen plus marathons. I've done Ironman triathlons. Nothing compares to the Kilmeade experience.
It's a grind.
And he does it every day.
Every day. And he's Mr. Smiley, right?
Yeah.
He doesn't do it with Grumpy. I mean, I don't know what the guy gets paid, but I hope Fox is paying him for goodness sakes. I would hope so because he's always doing something.
I wonder if he does bitch and moan ever. We have to get the scoop from his producers back there who are cringing right now, like we're not telling Griff anything. But no, he's such a positive guy. And I imagine actually he's happy and smiling and enjoying it every day because he gets to have people like you come in and sit in the studio. It's a great honor to have you.
You bet.
There's so many things, Governor, I'd love to ask you about. But the first thing I have to ask you is, have any Texas Democrats shown up in your state yet seeking refuge?
No, we have toll booths for that. That's how we screen people from coming over the border.
Because they're in Massachusetts.
Either you believe in the live free or die spirit, or we send you right back to Massachusetts, New York, and apparently now the Democrats. No, we haven't had any of those sightings. I think they're as silly as I think that what they're doing is. I think they're smarter than to try to come to New Hampshire with that kind of nonsense. But yeah, what they're doing is silly. I mean, are we going to set a precedent where every time you're going to lose a vote, it could be a big vote, a passionate vote, you run away? That what we're going to start doing all over the country now? So I'm as a former governor, I'm always concerned about precedents, right? Are we at some point, are the Democrats going to get in control and do something that maybe we don't, that maybe we, some gamesmanship the Republicans tried, or vice versa? And what we see now is the Democrats, running away from the process. Look, I'm maybe your audience will disagree with me. I don't like any of this. I don't like redistricting in 2025. I don't think it's necessary. They're going to control the process in 2030. Right? They'll get to the seats there. If someone said, look, these 5 new seats that you could get in Texas are going to be the game changer, and Congress is really going to have a major turnaround, and we're going to get a lot more stuff done in the next couple of years. I don't really see that myself. So I don't know. I just I always get nervous about the precedent. You see now and what are they doing, right? They're all making money off of it, right? These Democrats are running to Chicago with all this fake outrage. They're fighting for the Constitution and all this kind of nonsense, and they're going to make money off of it. And so it's showmanship more than anything. And as somebody who was like in this business for a long time, just trying to bust their ass and get stuff done, I don't like it.
It's so fascinating. And I talked a little bit with Rich Lowry, the editor of the National Review, about this idea of doing away with mid-decade gerrymandering, redistricting, just saying, can, as this one Congressman Kevin Kiley of California wants, he's a Republican, wants the bill to have Congress basically say to all of the states, like, you can't do it but once every 10 years, which is when it's done because
traditionally, that's precedent
of the census.
Yeah.
But you support that.
Oh, very much so. Yeah, because otherwise, as soon as you crack with it not being every 10 years, as soon as you crack that window a little bit, then some states will say, well, we do it every 10 years, but maybe we'll start doing it every 5 years. And then, you know what? Well, why don't we just do it every 2 years? Why not? I mean, what's the difference between 5 and 2? And then it's flipping around. And at the end of the day, what's the net result? Couple things. I hate gerrymandering. I hope most people should hate it. It doesn't really work fundamentally. I just do. It tells, let's say you're in a strong Republican district. Well, if you're a Democrat, you figure, well, I'm not going to run for office, or maybe Republicans don't come out to vote because they figure, we got this thing wrapped up anyways. Down the ticket, it disenfranchises people from participating in the process. The campaigns become weaker because they're not as tough of campaigns. I believe that good, tough campaigns brings the level of your entire district up. And it's great if they're all slightly Republican, because I'm a strong Republican and I want Republicans to win. But I always want a good campaign to happen, right? Because that gets everybody involved in the process. It actually, believe it or not, pulls you away from the social media and the polarization and the extremism by getting a campaign with lots of different points of view and different pieces of information. You have it out. Everyone goes out and votes. You want a high voter turnout. Gerrymandering crushes voter turnout. So things like that, I get very nervous about the process. The short-term results can be great, but the process can be really hurt. Yeah,
Governor, you make such a great point, because there's such richness in the fact that Texas Democrats fled to Illinois, because it's one of the heaviest Democrat gerrymandered states, where you've got essentially only 3 out of 17 House seats are Republicans, but yet we saw Trump with 44% of the vote in Illinois.
Illinois is the poster child for this. Yeah.
To your point, it's not these redistricting gerrymandered districts are not representative of the will of the voters.
They're really not. They're really not. Now, again, we have a red district in New Hampshire that's currently held by a Democrat. I think we're going to win it back. I don't like that, but if he was for lack of a better term, I guess, better candidate in certain years, and there's all these other external factors that come in, it kind of stinks sometimes. So again, you don't want to create a process where the entire country is locked up. I mean, if every state gerrymanders, right, then there's no more campaigns.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, just the primary is the campaign, and then you're done. And the general election, you mail it in. I think most people would agree that's not a healthy process, right? Yeah. So I'm a big believer that Republicans we're right on most issues. We're smarter on most issues. We have, the ability to talk about what we're doing, why we're doing it, for practical reasons, spending, fiscally responsible, at least at the state level, not the federal level, but at least at the state level is fiscally responsible. And we win for the right reasons, right? As opposed to Democrats that just kind of tug on heartstrings sometimes. They get very emotional. They get people charged up, and that's really how they tend to win. So I think we can win a lot of these races. I would love to see every district in the country completely purple, because I think Republicans would be crushing it, right?
Because they're right on the issues. Yeah. They're right on the border. God knows I had years of standing down there on the border from Texas to California, watching thousands come across. Now we have record numbers with third straight month, Governor, without a single illegal alien being released into the country, compared to the thousands. You had the lowest nationwide apprehensions in history last month, or July preliminary numbers, 24,000, compared to the month of December in 2023 under Joe Biden, there were 249,000. Remarkable stuff.
It's incredible. And that leads to public safety. And that leads to community involvement and safety in your schools and your kids being more safe. I mean, the drugs, the human trafficking. I mean, that one issue that Trump has just crushed it on has such reverberating effects in our everyday lives.
Yet Democrats are not learning that lesson. Every day there's another case of some Democrat lawmaker or politician calling ICE Nazis or Gestapo. And that brings me to what's happening here in New York City. It looks very much, Governor, like the people of New York City are about to elect a self-avowed socialist that most say are a straight up communist. That's how far left he is. And Zoran Mamdani won the primary. And you've got so many people between Cuomo, Adams, Curtis Sliwa. It looks like maybe just by the math, Mamdani has enough to win. He has had so many statements about defunding the police, wanting the SRG, the literally strategic force that responded to the shooting we had here just a few, days ago in New York City. He now is trying to walk that back, and we just had him reacting to new crime numbers here in New York City. Even though the city seems a little dirtier if you walk around than normally, the crime numbers are actually coming down, and Mayor Adams has been touting that. Here is what Mamdani had to say in responding to those numbers. Cut 15. Listen here.
I'm thankful for the reduction in crime across our city, and also to see it as part of nationwide trends where we're seeing much of the same, and the knowledge that we still have more work to do. It's important to celebrate that which has been done, that which has been achieved, and also know that we continue to strive for a city that is free from the kinds of mass shootings that we saw last week, that is free from the violence that still afflicts far too many New Yorkers.
And yet, Governor, he still wants to have these, therapists or mental, shrinks show up to deal with the criminals, not actual law enforcement.
I tell you what, look, I tease New York a lot. I'm, being from New Hampshire, to live here, to I state, the greatest state in the country, the whole 9 yards. You come to a place like New York, and you're right, by the way, it smells. I mean, this city, I was staying in Times Square, not too far from here, and the drugs, the homelessness, the smells, how disgusting the streets are. It's really kind of at an all-time high. Now, a guy like Mamdani, just look at the model, America. If you elect people like this, it only gets worse. Crime goes up, homelessness goes up, drug use goes up because they don't want to do any sort of enforcement. In the name of social justice, we're not going to enforce the law. That's the worst thing you could do for a city that, under what he just said, was, we're improving the crime rate. That's going to get completely reversed. And then you sent a message, by the way, to the rest of the country that if you want that kind of lawlessness and if you want a place where safety is no longer a priority and cops aren't the priority, come. And so what do you get? You get that element coming in, and you get folks that, at least that have the means, leaving. And everyone in the middle is just stuck with a crappy city.
You're so right, by the way. But the Mamdani effect is already spreading because you're seeing socialists out to Minneapolis with the very far left socialist candidate Omar Fattah running for mayor, likely going to possibly win there. And then we just got the results with Katie Wilson out in Seattle, the socialist candidate there challenging the incumbent mayor. Looks like she may actually have a shot at winning. Came out in a two-way race, a few points ahead. This isn't just isolated to New York City.
That's right. And, I always say, hey, the best thing that could happen to the Republican Party is Mamdani gets elected. And it will be a disaster, and it will be strong for us in 26. It's a message. What Mamdani will do is keep run-of-the-mill Democrats home. They'll say, and the financing. Right, all these big donors, they're saying we're not donating to a Democrat Party that's run by AOC and Mamdani. All that money will stay back. So politically speaking, in the short term, it's probably good for Republicans if something like this were to happen. But this is America, and we should want all of our cities to be super successful.
This is America's biggest city.
So what do we do, Griff?
Yeah,
what are we doing? Are we all voting for Andrew Cuomo?
What we're going to do?
I can't believe I'm saying it, but
we're going to solve that on the other side of a break. Can you stay with me for a second?
I'll stay all day long.
All right, former New Hampshire Governor Chris Sununu in the studio on the Brian Kilmeade Show. I'm Griff Jenkins filling in. We'll be right back. As a guy that works in Washington, D.C., anytime I can have Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina sit down in studio with us, well, it just doesn't get any better than that. Senator,
God bless you.
We're glad to have you. You've got a great new book out, One Nation, Always Under God, Profiles in Christian Courage. It's so important. We need to talk about that. But I do want to take an opportunity because, as the reporter, that's my day job that I hadn't screwed up yet. So I'm keeping doing that. And I think that one issue that we're going to be hearing a lot more about, Senator, in Washington is debanking.
Yes.
Now, this came up with, the president and big firms like JP Morgan Chase and, what President Trump, his experience with this is. But you're the chairman of the Senate Banking Committee.
Right.
And so I think if you could, what are we what's going on here? What is debanking and where's this headed?
Well, let's demystify this for the audience. I mean, back in the early 1960s and frankly beyond, there was something called redlining, where minorities were not allowed to have access to certain financial products because of the color of their skin. Today, that redlining is called debanking. But instead of it being a black or white issue, it is clearly a red or blue issue. It has become a partisan weapon. The liberals have weaponized the financial institutions in the same way they weaponized the Department of Justice against us. Parents coming to school board meetings, they called them domestic terrorists. Same way that they had the law enforcement officers come into a pro-life man's house. This whole notion of weaponization is what you should think about when you think about debanking. It's just in the financial footprint. So Choke Point 1.0, which was the first iteration of debanking, was when the liberals running financial institutions and their proxies decided that if you were running a gun manufacturing company, they wouldn't allow you to have a loan. If you were in the oil or gas business, they wouldn't allow you to have access to the financial institutions. Now, 2.0, choke point 2.0, focused on individuals that were conservative and emerging industries like cryptocurrency. And they literally said, we're going to have a thing called reputational risk. We're going to use that as a weapon to stop you from having access to our banks because your reputation might risk our reputation, so to speak. And as a result, Melania Trump debanked cryptocurrency companies, debanked. And we saw just recently, President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, debanked. We've already passed legislation out of my committee because I saw this earlier this year and decided to act on it. So I took a leadership position to pass something called the FIRM Act, which eliminates the regulator's use of the reputational risk as a way of unbanking or debanking someone. I wanted to get rid of that tool, and thankfully, I was able to work with the OCC as well as the FDIC, two bank regulators, to eliminate reputational risk from their playbook, making it easier for the Trumps, cryptocurrency, oil and gas, gun manufacturers to be banked in America and to have access not only to an account, but to loans as well.
It's so great for you, and you laid it out so eloquently and in clear, understandable terms there, Senator Scott, because, you know, these regulators is exactly what your legislation goes after, so much so that you had these big firms like JP Morgan Chase that blamed like, oh, we're not unfairly sticking it to Donald J. Trump. Our hands were tied. The regulators did it. And yet now JP Morgan Chase and others are also saying, oh, we support the White House's effort and Senator Scott's efforts. We'll see. That is the devil's in the details. We'll see where that goes.
Think about this. Think about how these same corporations, Bank of America, frankly, Delta Airlines, all lined up behind the Georgia, opposing the Georgia election law that was changed because they said it was racist.
Yeah.
They didn't read the bill. They literally didn't read the bill. I had them before my committee. I'm saying to myself, how can you say no to something you haven't read? And the biggest complaint coming out the bill was whether or not a person standing in line to vote can get water from a partisan person. You can get water.
Yeah.
Just not from someone who says, I'm a Democrat.
Right.
Unbelievable. That was the primary complaint. And yet these large companies lined up behind a law, against a law they didn't even read. We had the highest turnout of minority voters in Georgia in the history of the state.
Wow.
We had polls to the souls to the polls on Sundays.
Souls to the polls.
They had access that they had never had before, but they didn't read the bill. They just took the talking points from the far left and decided they didn't like something they hadn't even read.
Unbelievable. Well, listen, I want to get in the new book you got out,
yes.
One Nation, Always Under God, Profiles in Christian Courage. You're New York Times bestselling author now. Talk to me about why you wrote the book.
If you think about where we are today, we've got candidates running around this country selling socialism, selling that somehow, some way the government's coming to bail you out. My book, One Nation, Always Under God, isn't about socialism. It's actually about modern day American Christians taking powerful stance, ordinary people achieving extraordinary outcomes because they feel called by God to respond to a crisis in our country. This plays out throughout every single generation we've had Americans. Praise the Lord for that. I think about the Green family and Hobby Lobby. We talk about how that struggle started and look where it is now. We talk about Dorothea Dix, who looked at the state of affairs, state of play in the mental health institutions around the country during her time and saw how terrible the conditions were. She transformed how we saw mental health challenges and how we treated those who were suffering from mental illness. Her one stand, an ordinary woman, feeling the call of God to do something extraordinary, changed the way we deal with mental health issues. Then, and guess what? 100,000 Americans have lost their lives because of overdoses or fentanyl in the last 24 months. We must continue to have ordinary people take that extraordinary position that changes the course of American history. It's the only thing that ever has. If you read my book, you can get it today at Amazon.com or wherever books are sold. One Nation, Always Under God. You'll be inspired to do all that you can with your life to have a positive impact on the future of the greatest nation on the planet.
It's, in One Nation Always Under God is the book. You can go to Amazon and get it. I would encourage everyone to do it. And I was looking at the book, and particularly, it's funny you mentioned Dorothea Dix's story, Profiling Courage. And I was looking at that, and you wonder, and not to take you into the pulpit here too quickly, but once you sort of understand your faith, yes, your calling, and for many, I think was the case with me. Once you have children, your life begins to change a little bit about how you view things. But it's ultimately, the message from St. Pat's Cathedral. I went to Mass this past Sunday because they had me up here working on Fox and Friends on the weekend, and the homily was about understanding why God put us here. Yes. It doesn't have anything to do with spending hours scrolling on your phone. And It doesn't have anything working, 20 out of 24 hours always to put your career before your family.
Absolutely.
It's about finding your purpose. And then it's not unique to St. Patrick's Cathedral here. It's all across the country. It's a fundamental Christian message in churches from coast to coast. And do you feel like Dorothea Dix's story and Profiling Courage really, helps people to understand just how powerful that calling can be?
I really do. I think that one of the major lessons I took out of the book as I was doing the research for the book was that God has a purpose for every single person on the planet. What a blessing. Jeremiah 1:5 reminds me that before Jeremiah was called to be a prophet here on earth, the Lord wove that into his heart. Before he was ever born, God knew he was going to be a prophet. He knew that he had hardwired him for that gift. You think about Romans 12:2, that we can know the perfect will of God. Well, how? By operating in the fullness of our experience as Christians. And when we do that, I believe that we spread his love, not by speaking about it, but by our actions. And what you find in the book, One Nation Always Under God, is the actions that these men and women took as a result of prayer and a faith-filled relationship with the Lord. It changed our military. It changed, obviously, our healthcare. It changed education. It changed our country with a revival. Samuel Davies. The lessons of the book will tell you that God consistently uses ordinary people. Think about King David when he was just a shepherd boy.
Yeah.
The Lord seems to find just a run-of-the-mill person, but he can do amazing things. That's why I think the book is really exciting right now. We keep celebrating the wrong people doing the wrong things. Here's an opportunity by reading One Nation Always Under God to celebrate people doing the right things that will be measured through generations.
Senator, just the last minute I got with you, I remember when you first came to Washington after you got elected, and I had a chance to interview you, and now you've become such an important, powerful senator in Washington. Is God done with you yet?
I pray not. I'm still breathing, so my assumption is no. Here's the good news. He doesn't care about the title as much as he does the action. And I'm a big believer in James 2:17 that says faith without works is dead. So son, pray like it depends on me, but boy, get up and work like it depends on you. And so I'm just trying to figure that out along the way, right? And so I just look for ways to share his love and the passion I have for people. My life was changed by good, strong people across diverse communities who believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. And that's why I wrote the book.
And a great mom.
No one can deny I'm a mama's boy.
I know that
I'm
about
living her American dream, baby.
Listen,
I really am.
I'm living the dream, getting to fill in for Brian Kilmeade on the Brian Kilmeade Show. Senator Tim Scott, the book is One Nation Always Under God, Profiles in Christian Courage. You can get it on Amazon. Senator, thank you for taking time. It was a great pleasure to have you in the studio.
Thank you very much. We had a lot of fun.
you're considering doing a little more redrawing in Illinois, you already have some crazy districts in Illinois. Take a look at this. Look at 17 here. It does that. Then it comes up here and it sneaks around there and goes all the way up here and then goes right over there like that. And look at this one, kind of goes whoop up there. It's like the stinger on a scorpion down here. Is this common for all states to do?
Well, we handed it over to a kindergarten class and let them decide.
Okay, and that's the nonpartisan group that does this
Absolutely.
For you guys?
That's our independent commission, you know. That is, yeah. I mean, look.
So because all...
Here, let me jump in and save you, says Stephen Colbert with Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker. Griff Jenkins in for the great Brian Kilmeade, joined by Martha MacCallum. And Martha, it's fascinating. I mean, like even Colbert, who since his notice of being canceled 2 weeks ago has had 100% liberal guests on, feels the need to confront Pritzker and say, you know, the map, it's pretty crazy, these districts.
Yeah. I mean, it's embarrassing. And it's embarrassing that Pritzker has made himself sort of the centerpiece governor for this issue. And, we're going to welcome all of these lawmakers from Texas who aren't going to do their job, who aren't going to address the flooding issue, things that are important that are before their assembly right now. So, this is the kind of irony and hypocrisy that makes people hate politics. And I think they probably think it stinks on all sides. The thing that matters is how, is representing your state in a way that breaks it up into logical geographic districts, which is the way they were originally figured out. But the states decide this issue. The federal government, the Constitution, I heard the RNC chair this morning saying it was unconstitutional what was happening. The Constitution that matters in these situations is really the state and how they decide they're going to do this. So, they can be as squirrely as they want with these things, but, you do have a lot of people who've moved to Texas. A lot of people moved to Texas from places like California, and they want representation.
Exactly. And I think you put your finger on it. This is exactly the kind of thing that turns off the American people to voters in elections, and the push to get rid of mid-decade gerrymandering, I think, is probably one that'll get quite a bit of support on both sides, because both sides are doing it. Yep. And the end result is it not only is it not representative of the voters, but it really discourages, I think, as I was telling you at the break, discourages people from participating in the process, which is, candidates with different ideas and different perspectives of the political aisle that get involved. Because if you just carve out these safe seats, it's only one primary for one party, and there's no real participation.
Absolutely. I mean, if you're a Republican who wants to run in Massachusetts, Massachusetts has no Republican members of Congress, none. Okay. So, and 43% of the state voted for Trump in the election. So, you have to be, the process stinks. I think people see that up and down, and you're right. If you're a young Republican in a place like New York or Massachusetts or Illinois, and you're like, you know what? I think I have a shot at that district. I'm going to throw my hat in the ring. And the flip side of it is people who are in office right now who look at this situation, you have the retaliatory gerrymandering that is definitely coming in places like California and New York. They're worried. So it's a tricky game. It's a dangerous game, actually, because if you go after the 5 seats in Texas, which perhaps are well deserved given the makeup of the electorate there, you may lose a few seats in some place like New York or California. We hear the governors in both places saying that they're going to bring a knife to the knife fight.
Yeah, a knife to the knife fight. Well,
they're really all about fighting right now. Like
I know
the TikTok video, it's like, I'm going to kick you and punch you. I'm your fighter. And I really think they have, in a way, it goes back to David Hogg, who is in relative obscurity at the moment, but I would expect he'll make a comeback, who got booted out of the DNC because he was saying, look, we need to get rid of the deadwood in the party, and we need to, bring in younger voices, very progressive, obviously. Now they're all like, I'm all about fighting. I'm bringing the knife with me. It's
choose
like,
your fighter. It's such a great analogy. Yeah. And, to that point, Hogg was part of the DNC that spent $20 million to figure out how to talk to young men.
Yeah.
And I would submit to you that while gerrymandering is alive and well, clearly what's dead on arrival is woke advertising. And that is why all of us can't stop talking about Sydney Sweeney in the American Eagle jeans commercial, because just in the last 24 hours, we were talking about this on Fox and Friends this morning, it's not enough to go after Sydney Sweeney and call her a Nazi and everything else under the sun. Now they're going after Sully Bear, her beloved German Shepherd dog, saying that's a Nazi dog. Of course, that's the, salute to Hitler dog for a white woman. Crazy stuff. Crazy.
Yeah. I find this really interesting, and I give her credit because she comes from a generation that comments about everything, right? That puts everything out there. And she has not said a word about this. And I think her silence is very powerful. They did put out the video of her at a gun range with a very effective ability to shoot targets. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Now they're going after the dogs. It's so transparent. It's so obvious. It's so easy to make these stupid arguments like, oh, that's, your dog is a MAGA dog. So obviously that says something about you. But when you look at one of the things that first occurred to me when this jeans thing came out, I just immediately saw in my head when I walked through Times Square, huge campaign for Beyonce for Levi's. It's an awesome ad, right? And it's up on this huge video, and she's working in this diner, and she goes to leave work, and she kind of has this like wink with the other guy that works there. She gets her Levi's shirt out of the refrigerator where she keeps it, and then she pulls it out to put it on to leave work. I'm like, wow, what an amazing campaign. Beyonce doing this Levi's, like, it's so all-American. I'm not thinking like, oh, who's black, who's white. It's like, great campaign. Fantastic. Well done. And Sydney Sweeney, is doing this campaign. She's a very successful actress at this point. And, people just need to get off of this idea that, that a good ad is a good ad.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's not try to, peel back the layers and make it have some nefarious message. It's a good ad. Obviously, it's been hugely successful. And now they've got President Trump, pushing American Eagle jeans too. So I don't know how it could have gone better for them. People are saying, oh, how did the ad backfired? Let's analyze how the ad backfired. It's like, did it? Are you sure?
Yeah.
It looks like it's a winner to me.
Over the weekend, the New York Times wrote a piece about it because they obviously also want to talk about it because they need to, but they've got to figure out how can we talk about it and not be kind about it. And they were basically saying that Sydney Sweeney is overexposed. So now she's just doing too much. I say, keep going, kid. You are killing it. And it's fascinating because I'm old enough to remember I'm 54. So I was literally a teenager in the 80s, I think, when Brooke Shields' ad came out. And let me tell you, every girl I knew was wearing those jeans.
The Calvin Klein jeans. And they were also really controversial.
And every one of us guys
She was very young, and people were saying, oh, why did her mother let her do these ads? Because she was saying, nothing comes between me and my Calvins. So being provocative, getting people talking is what these beautiful women in blue jeans ads are all about, whether it's Beyonce or Sydney Sweeney or Brooke Shields. We found an ad, which was easy to find when you dig back into them, where Brooke Shields is talking about genetics. She's talking about, remember, she was very smart. She went to Princeton. And in the beginning, she has these like professorial glasses on, and she's like talking about genes and evolution and how genes, tend to weed out things that don't evolve over time. I mean, it was like way in. Did anyone say that she was, that she was spouting Nazi propaganda at that time? No. I mean, they talked about the fact that the ad was sexy, it was provocative, all of that stuff. But I mean, if you want to add that, with the regard to genes, this one was way worse. But of course, we were in a whole different place then as a country.
We were. And, do you think, Martha, that this is the moment, like an inflection point where truly the woke culture ends?
Well, President Trump said the other day, like, it's not cool to be woke anymore. And I have 3 kids in their 20s. They are, forming their own opinions about things, but I think they sense this, that, that the woke sort of generation has turned up empty in a lot of ways. I think people, no matter who they are, they like strength, they like boldness, they like to be patriotic about their country. I think these are things that resonate. I think that the pendulum always swings, right? I mean, we've got the Mamdani race here in New York. And so obviously that element has its supporters in the country. But I mean, I just sense that this whole ridiculousness of, saying that Sydney Sweeney is representing Nazi values is just people just openly laugh and scoff at it. So now you get to the point where you play the clip from that professor saying that this is eugenics, and people laugh. I mean, there was a time when it was like, oh my gosh, we better cancel the ad. We better get every corporation in America to say they disapprove of the ad. That's not happening anymore.
No. And of course, the CEO of Jaguar was the most recent to pay the price with that crazy androgynous alien weird,
no cars,
gender free, no cars,
no cars,
no Jag, no Jag in there. And it's fascinating. I have two daughters as well, 19 and 23. And it's interesting to see how they're responding. And by the way, you're very right. This generation comments on everything nonstop.
Everything's out there
Sydney
all the
Sweeney
time.
Not doing it. But I've texted some in my family chain. I went down to do Soul Cycle and walked past the American Eagle store down in Soho. And I took a selfie of myself because American Eagle's not backing down. I mean, literally every window is giant life-size Sydney Sweeney. And I just sent it to the family text chain and said, Sydney Sweeney's got great genes. And of course, it's a picture of me. And I got a unanimous dad, enough with it.
Right.
Knock it off.
They struck gold. They know it. They're not turning back on this ad campaign for quite some time. And the company is called American Eagle.
Yeah.
I've said.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
It's as American as Levi's, which has Beyonce, which is fantastic for everyone.
Right. And there is certainly a sense that as one of the reporters that covered so many of the anti-American protests, there is a sense among young people, at least what I see of my daughter and her friends, of patriotism coming back, of people caring again about America. And while, we're talking about American Eagle, but there's a real thing there. And so it may be a secondary win for that company, not only with Sydney Sweeney and taking down the giant woke culture behemoth, but also leaning into some more patriotic themes.
I think it's documented in terms of polling, in terms of what we saw in the last election. We saw a youth swing vote towards conservatives in the last round in 2024. There's no doubt about it. And I think that, you have to see whether or not that traction continues. But I think it's documentable that there is a swing among young people towards a more conservative value and a more sort of patriotic support of military, support of law enforcement, all of that. Now, the country goes back and forth on these swings over the course of history, but it's clearly where the momentum is right now.
It's 100%, actually. That's a great point, because I remember we just had a Pew poll, I believe it was, that found between 2023 and 2025, among young men 18 to 29, it was a 44% swing from Democrat to Republican. But among women, it was like 16, 17 points. And so obviously leaning into something like that for American Eagle, there's a ready-made audience out there that just showed up that wants to put those jeans on.
Think about it. It's so crazy that putting, we see people from all walks of life in successful ad campaigns all across this country, right? And so I think the idea of showing diversity in advertising has been, something that has been really fundamental over the last many years. But how do you get to the point where if you put a person who's blonde and blue-eyed in an ad, that's bad?
Yeah. Ridiculous. Hey, listen, Griff Jenkins filling in on the Brian Kilmeade Show. We got to take a quick break because I want to save some time if you have time, Martha.
Sure.
Because one of the legends, an icon in this radio business, is going to hang up his headphones and microphone.
It's a big story.
It's a big story. Yeah. We'll tell you what it is when we come back. Griff Jenkins on the Brian Kilmeade Show. It is your humble DC correspondent, Griff Jenkins, filling in for Brian Kilmeade on the Brian Kilmeade Show, and glad to have joining us the superstar of the story at 3 p.m. on Fox, Martha MacCallum. And Martha, you and I are both old enough to have grown up with one guy on radio that no one ever forgets, Howard Stern.
Oh my gosh, the shock jock, right? Like he is apparently going to finish out his contract. We're still getting details on this, but it looks like he is going the way of Stephen Colbert and others who are moving on. It's I'm going to talk to Jimmy Fallon about this actually later today, and I know that he feels that Stern just really sort of turned his back on the core of his audience and just became so virulently anti-Trump after, interviewing Trump many times back on his show and over all those years. So it's interesting to see the Trump. He's also paid an enormous amount, hundreds of millions of dollars. And I think for a lot of these companies, it's becoming about, as it should be for publicly traded companies, at some point you have to figure out whether or not it's worth the money. And I think they have other big names. I think they're like, we're done.
Yeah, it's remarkable. I mean, Howard Stern has some 20-year, roughly 2 decades.
2 decades, yeah.
Of a run and getting hundreds of millions of dollars, as you point out, from Sirius XM radio. And, when you think back to the days of when Howard Stern was really cutting his teeth in the movie, that if our listeners haven't watched the movie on Howard Stern, it was a great movie that was done. Because it really it lays out, him going through the tumble of talk radio in the 80s and the way it was and trying to break in. And then in the 90s, really starting to make his way and come into his own. But yet the Howard Stern of those early days that knew so much about what it took to succeed was knowing your audience and knowing your listeners. Versus now, is it complacency, just got too comfortable and didn't care?
I think you put it really well. And I think that's one of the problems. I think that's why anyone who has become successful, how do you maintain that edge? How do you maintain what got you there? How do you understand your audience and keep questioning yourself? And what happens is, I think this is part of what happened to him and may have led to this, is that you become overly indulgent in your own opinions, and you read your press releases too deeply, and you think that you don't have to constantly work to keep that audience. And I think back to this Johnny Carson clip that's been making its way around social media, and he did an interview for 60 Minutes with Mike Wallace. Almost never did an interview, Johnny Carson, but he was asked by Wallace, how come you never take a stance on anything? Why not? Why don't you do it? He said, because Jack Benny never took a stance on anything. And, he went through like some of the greats, and he said, once I do, you can't go back.
Yeah.
And then everybody's going to want me to weigh in on politics. And he said, I think people look to this as an escape. And one of the great things about the early Howard Stern was that he was an equal opportunity slammer.
Offender.
I mean, he offended everybody across the board. That's why he was the shock jock. And now there's nothing shocking anymore, right?
You talk, Martha, about the greats. You are one of the greats. 3 p.m. every day on The Story. Martha MacCallum.
Fun being with you, Griff.
Griff Jenkins in for Brian Kilmeade, having too much fun.